Welcome to the Supply Chain Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Heinisch, also called the Supply Chain Queen. And our episode today focuses on the state of sustainable apparel, what North America needs to know, in partnership with the Innovation Forum. Our guest, Christine Goulay, is the founder of Sustainabelle Advisory Services. Welcome, Christine. It's such a pleasure to host you today. And can we kick off? Just tell folks a little bit about yourself and the work that you've led as a prominent figure at the intersection of apparel, textiles, and sustainability.
Thanks, Sherry. I'm very excited to be with you to be talking about these important topics together. So yes, Christine Goulay, I've been working in sustainability and fashion for about 20 years already. So I've had some operational roles within ethical brands or innovative brands like Pangaea, where I was leading the B2B business, and then also worked within the sustainability department at the Kering Group, so a large luxury group. I'm based in Paris. And for the last 4 years, I've had my own consultancy, which is called Sustainabelle. So wink, wink, like B-E-L-L-E. Yeah, because I'm in Paris. And through Sustainabelle, I continue to work with a lot of brands on sustainability strategy, innovation management strategy, as well as working with NGOs. I've done some work with UNEP, with Textile Exchange. We're coming out with a report soon. So kind of more of this macro systems change work. And then finally doing a lot of work with innovators as a board member or advisory member for material startups, traceability startups, etc. So I'm very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, these are all the topics that folks listening are super passionate about too as well. So you're in the right place. I want to start with some of the regulatory pressure that's accelerating the focus. It's not just EPR frameworks. There are over 250 active schemes in Europe, but now California, the California Textile Recovery Act, New York, Washington, also stateside, consumer expectations, all the things, right? Including some of the economic headwinds and supply chain complexity. And so against this backdrop, the Innovation Forum has spent over 30 years convening the honest Chatham House rules conversations where corporate leaders and folks like yourself can come together and create future fit solutions. And we're going to focus on the US market right now. What's the honest read about where brands actually stand, not only on their sustainability commitments, but beyond what you see on LinkedIn banners and the public messaging?
So first, I would just say I love going to the Innovation Forum events. The Amsterdam event just happened last week, and it was great, but I find it's usually like a really nice size group, around 350 people in Amsterdam last week, super high expertise and Chatham House rules. So there's a lot of honesty in the conversations, which I love. And we were able to kind of address some of those issues. And I know the next one will be coming up in New York in just maybe
June
a little over 4 weeks. Yeah, so about a month. So very true. The regulation, it's sort of been this building tidal wave or tsunami for a while now where everyone's kind of saying it's coming. And it's really the first time that the textiles industry has been regulated to this extent. So I often make the comparison that, like, if you're looking at energy or pharma or transportation or any of the built environment, any of these other sectors, they're quite used to having heavy regulation because there's a very direct perceived health and safety issue. With apparel and fashion, and where this health and safety issue has come up just a little bit more recently, and as well as all of the environmental issues and social issues, which have existed for many years. So traceability is one area where they're trying to get their houses in order because they realize they need data. If they're going to be compliant with any upcoming regulation, they need the data from their supply chain, including digital product passport, of course. So yeah, it's been a building trend. It's been a building sort of anxiety-provoking thing for many of the brands because a lot of them are afraid they won't be compliant. There's too much information. And of course, there's a great cost associated with this and a great need to partner more with their supply chain. So a lot of changes, very transformative changes for the industry right now. And as you were saying, we might see a lot of nice announcements on social media or in press releases, but what's really happening I personally believe that there is a core set of brands that are in Europe, in the US primarily, that are just really doing amazing work. They're really trying to integrate sustainability into their business. They see it as a risk reduction strategy. They see the opportunity in connecting with clients, customers, new younger customers around sustainability. So regardless of regulation, there's this core leader group that's really trying its best to put the resources into it that need to be there and taking all the steps they need to take to make sure that they're not only going to be compliant, but go beyond that and seize some of the opportunities related to regulation, like with DPP, kind of connecting with customers and what that can mean. And then there's another group, another layer, which might be more saying, okay, what do we have to do? What is the minimum we need to do in order to be compliant? Obviously, in Europe, the brands are further ahead because there's so much legislation here. And I see some of the US brands sort of hedging and saying, do we really need to put the resources in now? Maybe we can wait. Maybe it'll cost us more to put the resources in now, and we should just wait and pay a fine. So really trying to do that arbitrage and see when they need to act.
Yeah, that's super insightful. And those 3 segment groups that you mentioned, what I find interesting about the folks that are just looking at compliance from a supply chain perspective, if you're just box checking, you might build an adequate supply chain, but it's not extraordinary. It's not innovative. It's not really making a market or becoming future fit and future proof, as you highlighted. There's a huge risk angle. There's a monetary angle to this. We haven't talked about circularity. I think that's one of the things that comes up a lot in my line of work. It doesn't really matter what sector you're in. Right. But certainly in fashion and apparel, that's been on the tip of many tongues for over a decade. And so when you think about the trends, you mentioned traceability. Obviously, transparency sits over all of this and compliance. Why should supply chain leaders pay attention, especially around the topic of circularity and traceability, in your point of view?
So I love how you're talking about being future fit, but I think not only do the brands need to be future fit, but so do their supply chain partners. And those supply chain partners who are kind of ahead of the game in terms of data collection, in terms of understanding who's upstream from them and establishing those relationships with really good partners all the way upstream are really just going to be better placed because they're going to be able to show their brand partners and customers that they've already worked on this risk reduction for them. Same with the CO2 emissions reduction. I think right now what I see with brands is they're gravitating toward the supply chain partners that are de-risking, understanding who's upstream from them, and making some commitments regarding reducing their own emissions and sort of having this roadmap and strategy for themselves. It's a lot of pressure for the supply chain to do all this, as we know, because margins are tough. Business is very volatile right now. Tariffs are coming and going. So it's a lot of responsibility for suppliers to take this on themselves as an investment cost, and also just understanding and having the education to take the right steps. A lot of brands have their internal vendor scoring systems, which take into account whether their supply chain partners are making some efforts in these domains, and then those are ranked higher and seen as priority supply chain partners.
Yeah, so the power of collaboration, and then also the financial incentive that if you aren't doing these things, you might be penalized in some way. Either you aren't picked or you aren't prioritized as strategic, is what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And that collaboration is also the underbelly of the data and analytics needed for circularity in textiles, and also to bring DPP to life. And so when you think about DPP, inaction live in the EU next year, are folks stuck in pilot mode, or are they really seeing the type of scale and insights that they're able to feed back into their business around circularity in textiles?
I think it's starting now with DPP in terms of getting that data and being able to feed it in and take advantage of the opportunities. One of the companies that I'm on the board of is based here in Paris, and it's called Fairly Made. And they actually help a lot of brands trace their supply chains and do product level LCAs for all of the products that get tracked. So they're working with groups like SMCP and LVMH, et cetera. And what I've seen through some of their brand customers is really being able to gather data that does give them additional revenue stream opportunities. And I think we've been referring to sort of compliance and an opportunity piece. And so this becomes very important. I like to say you shouldn't look at the profit and loss on procurement or the first sale of a product. Now we need to look at the total cost of ownership or the entire product life cycle to see where are those peaks going to be when you're re-engaging with customers during resale or repair or rental, and where are those troughs where you're actually going to be incurring additional costs because it's no longer linear, it's circular. So additional storage costs, inventory, or EPR at the end of life, and either paying more because you're not using the right materials or you don't have the right information, or actually getting a bonus. In France, they've had EPR for 20 years already, and there's an eco-modulation bonus where if you have certified inputs, certified materials, for example, you can get 70 cents back per garment, which is a lot considering that the average EPR cost is more like 5-7 cents. So I really see, this partnership with the suppliers being able to have the right information and then being able to build in over the life cycle of the product what this is going to mean in terms of revenue streams, tapping into new consumers, et cetera. It's really quite powerful, and it's a huge opportunity. But we're at the beginning of that road, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned France as a use case because we had the CEO of TerraCycle, Tom Saki, on a few weeks ago, and through Loop, which you may or may not have heard of, in all the markets that Loop is available, France has been the most successful because there's this confluence of factors, including policy. So policy was really definitive. So I love how you've brought that to life just now in the example you shared. So let's bring it to North America because we'll see each other hopefully in New York City, June 3rd and 4th. And California's Textile Recovery Act is probably one of the most significant pieces of apparel related regulation in the US to date. And so we know EPR, there are different schemas, the framework's evolving, but in the US specifically, it can feel like there's a ESG backlash in certain states. And so based on your experience with companies, how are they navigating this push and pull? We want to be innovative. Maybe we want to just comply and get ahead of things, but we also want to be profitable. What should supply chain and procurement leaders be preparing for related to EPR?
Right. So I love that California's doing this. As we know, they're always sort of a leader when it comes to environmental regulation. And de facto, it sort of becomes the requirement in the US because many brands are not going to separate the distribution to other states if they're shipping into the US. And what we do see is that also after California, it's adopted by other states and continues to sort of gain momentum. So I think that's really exciting for all of us who want more regulation in the space. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is that we have to talk the right love language of whomever we're speaking to. So this is obviously inspired from the 1992 book by Gary Chapman. There are 5 love languages. When you're in a romantic relationship, are you more responsive to physical affection? Are you more responsive to acts of service? Similarly,
gifts
words are good. Yeah, exactly. So similarly, we have to think of that a little bit when we're trying to articulate our sustainability objectives, both within our company, whether it's a brand or a manufacturer, but also externally, if we're talking with people in policy or anywhere. It's just part of life, right? We have to try to, you catch more flies with honey. And with sustainability, traditionally, everyone just goes in and says, we have to do this. It's the right thing to do. And it can be very off-putting. And as you rightly said, it can be very off-putting in today's context in the US. So I think one thing we need to do is be very cognizant of the language we're using. Instead of ESG, it's resilience, or, instead of sustainability, it's resilience. So what are some of the terms that you can use which will not make someone defensive or disagreeable? What are things that would ring true for them? What are their KPIs and metrics that they're judged against as an individual or as a department? And how can you show that what you're doing is going to help them? I think right now in procurement and sourcing, this is becoming a really strategic position, working hand in hand with people in sourcing and procurement in trying to understand how to construct the right business case to kind of get things through is paramount. And I think we do this by looking at the risk. I think we do this by looking beyond that first sale PM. And I think we do this by trying to pull in other departments and trying to get other departments to cover and subsidize some costs when we are pursuing some of these sustainability related initiatives.
Yeah, and I love your point about the love language. because I agree with you 100%. You mentioned the business case a couple times in your reply. So when you think about some of those key learnings from framing the business case, can you tease out a couple points for people listening?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is look at the cost of inaction and the benefits of action and the investment costs in order to pursue our sustainability objectives. So costs of inaction are going to be things like potential reputational risk, non-compliance risk, supply risk related to climate, water stress, etc. These can all be quantified now. And of course, regulation, there are things up in the air a little bit, but at least based on where we are now, what is this going to mean? What are the fines? We've seen reputational risk happen in the past to different companies and brands. What happened? Did their share price drop? Did their sales drop? And then again, on the upside, looking at additional market pull by being able to talk about sustainability or sustainable product, for example. We see that Gen Z is more interested in this. Are they engaging with it more? Do you have a higher EMV? Do you have higher average order values when you're selling these products? A lot of it is with these love languages bringing down the silos and understanding what are the KPIs we need to be tracking, because they're not being tracked very well. And that's
Yeah,
part of the
absolutely.
issue. And then, of course, the investment cost. So investment working with your supply chain, what is that going to mean in getting a supplier up to speed or building that capacity, whether it's around CO2 reduction, or working with materials that are certified, all of these things can be calculated today. It's just we're not spending a lot of time doing that. We talk about it, but we don't do it enough. And I think that's going to be the shift. How do they manage trade-offs that all businesses have between short-term and long-term, between growth and sustainability? Like, how do you manage that when you're also financially responsible for the brand and there are competing interests there?
And just to double click on that, those trade-offs that
Mm-hmm.
came up also in another event that I was hosting in Chicago. And I think with the layered geopolitical risk and tariffs, obviously, but geopolitical risk has injected a lot of uncertainty into supply chains that were already never normal. And this whole concept, like you mentioned, the love language, using the word resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Resilience has been the answer to disruption for over a decade, but it's incomplete in a lot of ways because the system in which a lot of our solutions are designed is fundamentally broken in a linear economy.
Yeah.
And so, just to double click with some of those trade offs
Mm-hmm.
in balancing impact
Mm-hmm.
and profitability, what were like two hard earned lessons?
Yeah. Well, one was to focus on the outcomes, to try to avoid this binary setup in the first place, that it's one or the other, and look at the outcomes that the company is trying to achieve and taking it out of the temporary context. And another thing is like the need for data, to be really good at forecasting, and how that can also kind of make people feel more relieved and comfortable going forward in decisions that might be a little more long term, because the work has been done to be as certain as possible that they're moving in the right direction. And when you
Yeah.
don't have those data points, and when a lot of things are based on assumption, any of those longer term decisions also seem even more risky. And you just say, oh, someone was really great just saying, well, let's do one more season and then we'll do that. Let's just do another season and then we'll do that. So yeah, trying to get
Yeah,
beyond.
I love that. And so I can't believe that almost half the year is over in 2026. And when we think about the next half, a lot of these planning cycles to get to that right size forecast, especially in fashion, you're already thinking about next summer. There are a lot of nuances in fashion and apparel. And when we think about that one thing that's going to separate people who are doing it and doing it well and making real progress
Mhm.
versus people that are falling behind, what should a chief supply chain officer or VP of sourcing or even a CFO absolutely put on their agenda for the second half of 2026?
Every person within their teams should have KPIs related to impact as well as to financials. One of the biggest reasons why it's hard for someone in sourcing or procurement wants to go with something that's certified or whatever. Very hard professionally when KPIs are only related to margin and cost. So I think leaders in the space will be able to construct the right incentives for people in their teams to make balanced and holistic decisions that take into account the risk and the opportunity as well as the margin on that first product sale, which really is just a house of cards in many ways, in my opinion. If we're thinking of circularity, if we're thinking of discounts that go into play, if we're thinking of unsold inventory, getting beyond that is going to be key too.
What would an example of impact measurement be to create more
Impact
balance?
KPIs? Yeah, it would
just
be
a
like,
couple.
having a certain percentage of certified materials that they're buying. It would be lowering, CO2 or water use in the materials they're buying, those sorts of things.
Supplier education and capacity building could be one, I think.
That could be
too.
one.
Great impact measurement.
And one thing that we're seeing now is within some RFPs that are being put out by procurement teams and others, within the RFP, there's a space for those responding to add information about CO2 emissions, for example, and that's calculated into the overall envelope of what the cost would be. So there are a lot of really new kind of innovative ways to start including this information more and more into the day-to-day business and decision making, which will make all the difference, really.
Yeah, fantastic insights. And so June 3rd and 4th, the Innovation Forum NYC event on Roosevelt Island. What should folks come prepared to wrestle with?
Ooh, good one. I think people should come realizing that there's a lot of honesty there, and people should be ready to be honest. It's like I said, it's Chatham House rules. It's very well respected and always has been within these innovation forums. So come and be ready to share your best practices, share your lessons learned, share your case studies. You want everyone to leave there saying, I got something that I can action when I go back to my team. And that's what makes these events so special, because it gets beyond sort of the blah, blah, blah that we can hear and gets much deeper so that people can really learn from each other and take things back and implement them. So that's one of the reasons I really like them.
Wonderful. Christine, it's been such a pleasure to host you. Moving beyond the blah, 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 sustainable apparel is not just a niche concern. It's really a supply chain systems challenge that's going to require the same rigor, the same collaboration that you opened with, and design thinking as any major operational transformation. I am looking forward to joining the Innovation Forum at the Sustainable Apparel and Textiles Conference USA event in New York City, June 3rd and 4th. It's a must-attend event. Everyone who's listening, make sure that you check out the links to IF and the Supply Chain Queen channels in the chat. And thank you so much, Christine, for joining. It has been such a pleasure.
It's been great speaking with you. Thanks so much.